Well, well, well. Good morning, church. Welcome to this edition of Checking In with Pastor Jim. It's Friday, July the 17th, 2020. It is my sweet mother in law's birthday today, Lou Treadwell. And I want to thank Donna Early for checking in with you yesterday and bringing you up to date on all the latest technology. Someone said to me after my Wednesday check-in that they just feel like they might have to give up on technology altogether. And that is an option. You know, we've lived in a world without it for a long time and may be able to survive without it still. But don't give up. Most of us can learn and benefit from technology, and I'm still learning. I am still learning. So maybe you can learn right along with me. Wanted to say that I'm very grateful that Larry West survived a bad fall this past week. I didn't find out about that until Wednesday evening, and it came as a shock to me. But then there was Larry's reassuring comment on Facebook that he was going to be okay. Larry, I hope that's still true. I hope that you're doing well, that you're going to make it through this. I do want to ask for your prayers for Mary Lynn Bandera, who has commented on our page recently and said that she needs extra prayer, having been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She is a near neighbor of my daughter's and faithful member of First Baptist Church. We need to be praying for her. What is Lynn Miller saying? Need to remember all the kids who are home and beginning to have more and more problems with isolation. Yeah, we do. And not just kids, but adults as well. Everybody who's having some trouble with isolation. Larry West says, good morning, I'm fine but sore. I can believe it, Larry, I really can. I hope you're going to be okay. I want to talk a little bit today about emotions, about feelings. I heard somebody say just the other day that facts don't care about your feelings. I thought, well, that's true. The facts just don't care how you feel about them. They're still the facts, right? But I thought maybe the corollary is also true, that your feelings don't care about the facts. Feelings are often completely irrational, right? They don't even make sense, but you still feel that way. And so when someone is in this highly emotional state, it doesn't always help to present them with the facts, thinking that that will settle them down and make everything okay. And I'm just going to say, in the last few weeks, emotions have been running high, not only in our country, but also in our city and up and down the length of Monument Avenue. Feelings have been running high. And I want to talk about some of those feelings. I have a book on my shelf called Leadership on the Line by Ronald Heifetz, and it's a great book. I mean, I understand that it's a great book. I haven't read all of it, but I read enough to get this one quote that has stayed with me ever since, and it was years ago. But Ron Heifetz said this. He said, we often think that people resist change. Well, it's not change that they resist so much as loss. And with every change, there is some loss. Think about that for just a minute. With every change, even the good changes, there is some loss, right? So I'm thinking my daughter Ellie, who's just brought this new life into the world, little Leo, he's adorable. It's big change. But there has been some loss. What has been lost is the way things were before, when things were relatively peaceful and quiet and you could get a good night's sleep. So yes, good change, but some loss of what used to be. So think about this for a minute. With every change, there is some loss, and it's the loss that people resist. Here's what I would add to that. With every loss, there is grief. And that's just true. With every loss, no matter how small, no matter even like if you get your appendix taken out, there is some grief over that loss, even though you don't use your appendix much these days. So people don't resist change, they resist loss. With every loss, there is grief. and grief is heavy and hard to deal with. I think these days in our city, there are some people who are grieving very seriously because of loss. And it's not just the loss of a few statues, which, by the way, have not been lost forever, but put in storage. I hope they will be displayed in some very appropriate place at some point soon. But there's some loss there, and some of the loss is about the way things used to be, right? I've heard from people who say, I used to walk up and down Monument Avenue, or I grew up on that street, or I've always been coming to that church and that statue has always been there, and now it's gone. So it's not that these are Confederate sympathizers. It's not people who, are championing the lost cause. Some of them are just people who say, well, the world is changing without my permission. How many times have you felt that way? That the world is changing without your permission. And when there is change, there is loss. And when there is loss, there is grief. And when you're grieving, it doesn't matter how many facts people throw at you. You are dealing with grief. And grief is hard for us. It's heavy. So there may be some people in our city, maybe lots of people in our city who are celebrating because of recent changes. They're feeling really happy and glad, and they're clapping their hands together. And some of the ones who are grieving don't understand how these could be happy. And the ones who are happy don't understand how these could be grieving. Have I mentioned, by the way, that our feelings are irrational? That they don't make sense? They're just feelings, and we have to deal with them as feelings. So I want to say this to you this morning. If the change that is occurring is resulting in a sense of loss for you, and if the loss has led to grief, then you need to manage that like you manage all other grief. Grief takes time. It does. And sometimes even a few days can make a huge difference when it comes to grief. For other grief, it takes years. You may never completely heal from your loss, but you manage grief in the same way. I could say more about that. Maybe I will. If you ask for more about grief, you can put something in the comments below and say, yes, Jim, next time you check in, tell us more about how to manage grief. But the other thing I want to talk to you about is anger, because anger happens, right? It's an emotion, and it is often irrational. We get angry without good reasons. Anger doesn't always need a reason. But I want to say this about anger, and I have said it before in sermons, but it never hurts to be reminded. If you draw a circle like this and think of that as yourself, and then if you think of an arrow coming toward that circle, that arrow is a threat or a perceived threat. And it is coming toward that circle that represents yourself, right? So you feel threatened. And when you feel threatened, anxiety begins to build up, and you have to decide in that moment, do I fight or do I flee? Those are the two things you're thinking in that anxious moment as you feel that threat coming closer and closer. So anger comes when there is a perceived threat. And here is one helpful tip for dealing with anger. Ask yourself the question, what is it that is threatening me? Right? I'm feeling angry, or maybe I'm just feeling anxious. It hasn't turned into anger yet. But what is it that is threatening me, and is that a real threat? So you could ask yourself, let's say you live on Monument Avenue, and statues have been defaced and removed recently, and you're feeling angry about that. Maybe you could ask yourself this question. What is it that is threatening me? What is being threatened? Is my life being threatened? Well, no, not really. I'm in my house. I feel safe enough. I mean, there's sometimes I worry, but I feel safe enough, you might say. Is my life being threatened? No. So what else is being threatened? Are my property values being threatened? Probably so. Is that a good reason to get angry? I don't know. You'll have to deal with that on your own. Is tradition being threatened? The traditions that I hold dear. Well, maybe they are. And maybe it's a good time to examine those traditions. Where do they come from and how dear are they? Is history being threatened? Well, no, history is history. You can move a monument, but you can't erase history. So it helps me sometimes to ask myself those questions. I'm feeling, right? I'm feeling threatened. It's making me angry. But can I go back and look at the threat and decide whether or not that is a real threat? This is very helpful in dealing with the emotion of anger, and I would recommend it to you. When you're feeling grief and loss because of change, you can understand grief happens, and you have to work through it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You have to go through it. When anger happens, it helps to understand. It comes from the anxiety that is created by a perceived threat. And then you have to ask yourself about the threat. Is it real or is it only perceived? Sometimes we can bring the facts to our feelings and it helps, even though feelings are not rational. We can say to ourselves, right now, my life is not in any danger. And so I can take a deep breath. I can relax a little bit. I can let go of some of my anger. So that's today's lesson for you. Just maybe some helpful pastoral counseling about dealing with emotions. This is what I do sometimes in my study when people come to see me. And often they do come to see me because they're sad about something or they're angry about something. And so we have this kind of talk. Let's imagine today that you and I are sitting in my study and we're having a talk about your feelings. And if you're feeling some of those feelings and if this talk has helped you, I hope you'll post that in the comments section below. Say, thank you, Pastor Jim, for helping me think about grief and anger in a little different way. Friends, the world is changing all around us, but here's the truth. It has always been changing all around us. They say change is the only constant, and that's true. With every change, there's some loss. With every loss, there's some grief. Sometimes that makes us angry, and we need to figure out how to deal with it. Because what I want is a world that is a happier and better place. I want a world where people are kinder to each other than they have to be just because they need somebody to be kind to them. So today, may someone be very kind to you, and may you in return be kind to someone who may need it more than you know. Have a happy Friday, friends, and happy birthday to Lou Treadwell, my mother-in-law. I'm going to be celebrating with her later today. Hope you can find something to celebrate on this Friday, July the 17th, 2020.